Hey everyone, I'm Julian Chikatu, and today we are looking at iOS 13. It's the latest update coming to your iPhone in September, and it has a wealth of new features like dark mode and swipe typing. So let's check it out. Let's start with the most visually exciting change in iOS 13, and that's dark mode. Apple made a big fuss of it at its WWDC announcement, and it's pretty easy to turn on. Just go to Settings, Display, and you'll see a new option for dark. And when you turn dark mode on, give it a second, you can also see an option for automatic, where you can automatically have it turn on at night, for example. And you'll see that the entire interface now has that darker tone. And that also means Apple's apps, for example, will support it, the dark tone that is. So everything here has a darker look to it. And if you have an OLED panel, like on the iPhone XS, it'll look even better as compared to the LCD on the iPhone XR. Now, other third-party apps do not support it yet. For example, let's look at Google, and it's not supporting it, but hopefully third-party developers will add support for the native dark theme so that you can get dark mode on all of your apps. Now, in general, iOS 13 is going to give you performance improvements as well. You're going to have twice as fast app launch times. Face ID on Face ID enabled phones is going to be 30% faster, and that's something I've definitely noticed. It's about a hair faster than phones running iOS 12. As to the performance upgrades, it's really hard to tell a difference because we're running iOS 13 on the latest and greatest from Apple, so they're already buttery smooth. It's obvious that if you install iOS 13 on an older phone, like say an iPhone 6S, you'll probably see some nice performance boosts out of that. This may sound weird to Android owners, but iOS has always had a restriction for the apps that you can download over cellular. If it's a particular big app, for example, you wouldn't be able to download it on cellular, and iOS would say you need to connect back to Wi-Fi. Well, that restriction is no longer here in iOS 13. You can see that there's a new section for app downloads in the iTunes and App Store settings, and you can see that you can click on Ask If Over 200 megabytes, and so now if you're on cellular and you're trying to download a big app that's over 200 megabytes, it'll just ask you, or you can of course say always allow. That means for people with large data plans, you no longer have to be restricted to this dated rule. The Photos app can look a little cluttered, as you can see here. It just is a lot to look at. There's a lot of images, and it doesn't really look visually appealing. That's why Apple has introduced a few new tabs to change up the view. Right here is the days view, then there's the months view, and there's the years view. And what these views are doing are they're using on-device machine learning to select the best images that it thinks represents that particular time or moment, and that'll be displayed. And the same applies to, as you can see here with live video or live photos, it'll autoplay things like that just to give you a little more of a dynamic camera roll. And for the years section, if you have a particular recurring moment, for example, if someone's birthday is around this time and you have that pictures of that person's birthday over the years, it'll populate the other years with that person's birthday photos so that you have a nice collage of things to look back to. It's not just visual changes in the Photos app as well. There are far more editing tools when you're taking a look at your photos. You can press the edit button and you can see here that the layout is a little different, and you have a lot more options to choose from as well. So you have things like noise reduction, vibrance, warmth, sharpness, definition, and I really like how you can change things. For example, let's go to warmth and let's crank the warmth up a bit. And now if you tap on that, you can see what the original image is like, and you can tap on it again to go back to your edits. And of course, what's even better is that all of these new photo editing tools are available for videos as well. So you can do edits to videos and you'll get the same breadth of features as you can see here. And some people might be relieved to find out that you can finally rotate a video in the native Photos app. So you don't need a third-party app now to rotate a video. That's always nice. Now, there are also some minor user interface tweaks that I really like. For example, one is when you want to switch to a different Wi-Fi network, before you had to go into the Settings app, but now you can actually just use the Control Center and press and hold on the Wi-Fi icon, and you can get quick access to all the nearby Wi-Fi connections and just tap on one to connect to it. Now, of course, you can also still go to the Settings app or just tap on here to go to Wi-Fi settings directly. But the same also applies for Bluetooth pairing. Essentially, you can just tap and hold on Bluetooth and you can see nearby devices to pair with Bluetooth. When you're changing the volume, what used to happen is that the volume indicator or the HUD would pop up right in the center of the screen. It's a bit disruptive. Apple has tweaked that now to make it a lot more subtle. You can see it's a little bar here on the left-hand side right next to the volume keys. And similarly, when you turn off or on the mute switch, there's no longer a HUD that pops up in the center of the screen, but instead a nice subtle little icon at the top. There are a few privacy-minded upgrades in iOS 13 as well. For example, with location services. Now, all of these apps have been asking for my location access so that they can use it for some particular reason. Some apps obviously have genuine reasons to have my location data, like Google Maps, for example, but other apps, not so much. So there's a new function in these location options. You can now choose to ask next time. So what that means is when an app is asking for your location data, traditionally you've had always while using the app or never as options, and now ask next time lets you give it access in that one instance, and then the next time you open that app and it asks for your location data, it'll have to get permission again. It's just a nice way of knowing which apps will be getting your location information. In a similar vein, Sign In with Apple is a new feature. It's not available in the public beta just yet, but it is coming in the fall. But basically it's similar to other single sign-on services like Sign In with Google or Sign In with Facebook. The benefit is you do not need to remember a password, and even more so, Apple is touting privacy here so you know exactly who has access to your data. Even better, Apple is offering a proxy email. The developer will never see your actual email, but a third-party email from Apple, and the information that goes to that email will be routed to your main inbox. One of my favorite features in iOS 13 is the ability to slide to type. Now, people on Android phones or Windows phones or even connoisseurs of third-party keyboards in the App Store have been able to do this for some time, but it's finally coming as an option in the native keyboard app, and it works really well, and I've been using it nonstop. Mostly because I use it on Android phones all the time, so I'm pretty comfortable with it. It may take you some time to get used to it, and of course, if you don't like it, you can turn it off. There are some text editing improvements in iOS 13 as well. Notably, you can now just drag the cursor wherever you want it to. I do wish Apple magnified the cursor a little more because it can be a little tough to see exactly where it's going, and you can also see as you slow down, it becomes a little more precise. Overall, I do like this feature though, that you can now drag the cursor anywhere. One other thing is that when you want to copy and select, you can now click and drag, and copying has this weird three-finger gesture. You basically pinching in, and you can see it just copied it, and if you wanted to paste that somewhere, you pinch out. So it pinched out, and it definitely pasted it, but I would say this is definitely not an ideal way of copy pasting. I would much rather just use the typical options that are over here. I've also tried this on iPads, which is really what it's meant for, and I still find it a little awkward, so not really a fan of that triple finger gesture. In iOS 13, the Find My Friends app and the Find My Phone app have been merged to just Find My, and as you can see, it's pretty easy to search for your devices and also locate your friends and family if you have family share on, and it's always nice to see some app consolidation. Apple Maps has a few interesting updates in iOS 13. First of all, you can see it looks absolutely gorgeous in dark mode, and zoom in and you can see a lot more information. Things like traffic indicators are a little better laid out. A lot of this will depend on where you are. Apple said by the end of the year, the entire US will be mapped out, and that means you'll just get a lot more detail. But other than that, there are a couple of other features. For example, one is you can add favorites now, so things like home, work locations, anything else that you want to have in there, you can add. And similarly, there are also places that you can have, or collections rather. So if you have a list of restaurants that you want to hit up, you can add them as a place here. And you can also customize all of that by different lists. So one for restaurants, one for museums, one for really whatever you want. Just adding a little more customization options in Apple Maps. However, the coolest feature is kind of similar to Google's, well, let's just say it's exactly similar as Google's Street View. Now, it doesn't work here in New York because it's not available, but let's go to Cupertino. And now let's try to, say, zoom in all the way to a specific area. And you can see this new feature called Look Around. Now look around, again, is very similar to Google Street View. I think it performs a little better in the way the animation works. For example, with Google Street View, you have to double tap and it would awkwardly zoom in. With Apple's look around, it seamlessly moves in a sort of a fluid motion that just looks really nice. And let's go over here. Really nice animations, and you can get closer and see things with a little more detail. Of course, you can zoom in on images as well. We all know how this works. You know, it's again very similar to Street View. It acts and performs the same. Apple's just has a little more depth because there's a 3D depth added in here, as well as fluid motions. There are a couple of core apps that got a big design overhaul. One of them is the Reminders app. As you can see here, it has a new look. It looks a lot nicer, especially with dark mode. And adding a reminder is just as easy. You can just type, let's say laundry with the swipe typing. Well, that's late. Laundry with the swipe typing feature. And you can see here at the top, there are some time-based things you can do, whether it's today, tomorrow, this weekend. Location-based, whether it's arriving home, getting in the car, and you can do custom ones as well. And let's go back in and jump into the more granular updates. You can flag them as priority, and that'll show up on the home page. And you can also add them to lists, so you can have an entire, personal to-do list. You can have a work to-do list. You can have all sorts of other lists that you really populate over here, and that just lets you dive into your lists a bit more. I think it takes a couple extra steps to get to your reminders now, but I do like the way the app looks, and if you're someone who makes a lot of different types of lists, this might be something up your alley. Similarly, the Health app also got a big revamp. Basically now there's a summary tab rather than the 5 or 6 tabs that were here at the bottom. You just have the summary and the search. And the summary tab can be customized. You can basically star the things that you want to see. And that's about it. It lays it out pretty neatly. And of course, third-party apps that you use will be also added here. The data will be added here. I think it looks a lot nicer, definitely less claustrophobic or cluttered. And similarly in the Activity app, if you have a Apple Watch, there's a new Trends tab that basically lets you see your overall trends based on years prior or months prior. Another feature I wanted to highlight is in the accessibility options. It's called Voice Control, and it essentially lets you control the entire phone with just your voice. Now, not everyone's going to use this, but I think it's pretty handy for those that do need it, and it works really well. So there's a couple of commands here that you can say, but essentially you can see this little mic icon at the top here, so that's indicating that it's listening for you. So I can say things like, open photos. And there you go, it opened up photos. Open Google. And you can also do things like show numbers. So now it added numbers for every single thing here. So now I can just say a number to tap on it, for example, 3. And there you go. Not everyone will need it, but I'm glad to see it on board. We just looked at some of the biggest features in iOS 13, but there's a whole lot more in the overarching update. Like Siri, which has a more natural sounding voice. You can also block all unknown callers now. There's a low data mode to help with saving cellular data. Updates in the App Store is housed in a different section. Full page screenshots are now available in Safari, and there's also time-synced lyrics in Apple Music. Now, you can try it for yourself now. The public beta is available if you have an iPhone SE or iPhone 6s or later, but we strongly recommend against it because there's a lot of bugs. However, if you want to wait, you can get the official version in September alongside the latest iPhones. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like that video, hit the like button, subscribe, tap the bell icon for notifications, and head to digitaltrends.com for more.